Imagine standing in the year 1862. The air is heavy with uncertainty. The nation is divided, and young men march off to war. Until now, we've only seen them in faded black and white portraits, silent reminders of a turbulent past. But today, through the power of restoration, their eyes, their faces, and their presence return to us in striking color. These are not just soldiers of history. They are human lives reimagined. Major John Fielding Milholland, Phillips Georgia Legion Cavalry. Milholland had been a schoolteacher and court clerk before the war. He was elected second lieutenant in Company B of the Legion and eventually became major. Milholland was mortally wounded on November 8, 1863 near Stevensburg, Virginia, and died as a result of those wounds on November 10, 1863. Second Lieutenant Thomas Holmes Keenan, Phillips Legion Georgia Cavalry. Keenan enlisted on July 4, 1861, and served through January 1862. At that point, he resigned his commission to accept a commission as a first lieutenant and ADC in the Provisional Confederate Army, serving in various staff duty functions. After the war, Keenan became a doctor. He died in 1910 in Atlanta and is buried in Baldwin County, Georgia. First Corporal Truman E. Kellogg, Company E, 14th Georgia Infantry. Kellogg enlisted on July 4, 1861. He was killed on August 29, 1862 at the Battle of Second Manassas. Sergeant James P. Hargrove, Company H, 7th Georgia Infantry. This image is purported to be of Hargrove. He enlisted on October 1, 1861 as a private, later becoming sergeant. He was killed on November 29, 1863 during the siege of Knoxville, Tennessee. Private William G. Howard, Company K, 35th Georgia Infantry. Howard, from Campbell County, enlisted on February 18, 1862. He died on April 7, 1862 in a hospital in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Private Charles H. Farmer, Company B, 35th Georgia Infantry. Farmer, born on May 12, 1844 in Conyers, Georgia. Enlisted on September 21, 1861 in Newton County, Georgia. He was killed on his birthday at the Battle of Spotsylvania, Virginia on May 12, 1864. Lieutenant Colonel Gustavus Adolphus Bull, 35th Georgia Infantry. Bull enlisted as a junior second lieutenant in Company B, 4th Georgia Infantry. On October 17, 1861, he was appointed as a lieutenant colonel of the 35th Georgia Infantry. Bull was mortally wounded on May 31, 1862 at the Battle of Seven Pines, Virginia, and died as a result of those wounds on June 1, 1862. Private James M. Giles, Campbell Volunteers, Company E, 35th Georgia Infantry. Giles, born in Douglas County, Georgia, enlisted on August 12, 1861. He contracted measles and died on October 9, 1861 in Richmond, Virginia. Private William Barry Boswick, Ringgold Rangers, Company C, 13th Georgia Infantry. Boswick enlisted on July 8, 1861. He became sick and went home on sick furlough. He died at home on November 1, 1861 in Spalding County, Georgia. Private Robert Larkin Andrews, Holloway Grays, Company E, 3rd Georgia Infantry Battalion. Andrews, a native of Upson County, enlisted on August 8, 1861 in Cobb County. He was sent home on sick furlough and died in Upson County on August 5, 1862. Colonel James Alpheus Skidmore Harris, 43rd Georgia Infantry. Harris was the superintendent of a copper mine at Canton, Georgia before the war. He enlisted as a lieutenant in the 2nd Georgia Infantry when the war started and was eventually promoted to lieutenant colonel in the 2nd Georgia before being transferred to the 43rd Georgia as colonel. Harris was mortally wounded, shot in the leg at the Battle of Baker's Creek, Mississippi on May 16, 1863, and died the following day. 2nd Sergeant James Green Burton, Company D, 2nd Georgia Infantry. Burton, a 20-year-old attorney from Burke County, Georgia, enlisted on April 19, 1861 as a 2nd sergeant. Paperwork was pushed forward to commission him an officer, but it never came to fruition. He was wounded on September 17, 1862 at the Battle of Sharpsburg at the Lower Bridge while attempting to recover the body of Lieutenant Colonel Harris. Burton was killed on July 2, 1863 at the Battle of Gettysburg. First Sergeant Robert Henry Lowry, Company A, 17th Georgia Infantry. Lowry enlisted on August 13, 1861 in Webster County, Georgia, as a 3rd sergeant and eventually became 1st sergeant. Lowry served until the end and surrendered at Appomattox in April 1865. Captain Marmaduke H. Marshall, Company K, 17th Georgia Infantry. Marshall enlisted on August 15, 1861 as a private and rose through the ranks to captain. He was wounded in August 1862 during the Second Manassas Campaign. Marshall was on furlough when the war ended. Corporal Angus M. Perkerson, Private Stephen H. Ferguson, and Private Jeremiah S. Gilbert, Company A and Company E, 9th Georgia Artillery Battalion. Perkerson enlisted on May 7, 1862 in Atlanta as a private, later becoming a corporal. Ferguson enlisted on May 7, 1862 in Atlanta. Gilbert enlisted on May 7, 1862 in Atlanta. The military file for each of these men is rather limited and incomplete. Private William Henry Hortman, Crawford County Grays, Company E, 6th Georgia Infantry. Hortman enlisted on May 27, 1861. He was wounded on September 17, 1862 at the Battle of Sharpsburg. He was captured in May 1864 and held as a POW until the end of the war. Hortman died in 1923 and is buried in Crawford County, Georgia. Private William Carlton Odom, Baker County Fire Eaters, Company H, 6th Georgia Infantry. Odom enlisted on July 28, 1861. He was wounded in the thigh on July 1, 1862 at the Battle of Malvern Hill, Virginia. He was seriously wounded at the Battle of Sharpsburg on September 17, 1862, resulting in the amputation of his right arm. He died in 1898 in Blakely, Georgia. Private Stephen T. Beasley, Private Henry Harrison Towns, and Private William B. Beasley, Evans Guards, Company K, 13th Georgia Infantry. Stephen enlisted on July 8, 1861 as a private, but was soon appointed assistant surgeon of the regiment. He served until March 21, 1862 when he resigned. Henry enlisted on July 8, 1861 in Troup County. He suffered a concussion at the Battle of Fredericksburg, Virginia, in December 1862. He recovered and served until the end, surrendering at Appomattox in April 1865. William enlisted on July 8, 1861 in Troup County, Georgia. He served for a time as a courier. He was on furlough when the war ended. Captain Barnard Curley, Company A, 4th Georgia Infantry. Curley enlisted on April 26, 1861 in Talbot County, Georgia, to serve for 12 months. At that time, he served as a major in the 5th Georgia State Guards and later as a colonel in the 65th Georgia Militia. After the war, Curley lived in Talbot County, where he died on January 1, 1898. First Lieutenant James C. Hicks, color bearer, 3rd Georgia Infantry. Hicks enlisted on August 21, 1861 as a private, and eventually became first lieutenant and color bearer in February 1865. He was surrendered at Appomattox in April 1865. Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson Mirabel Lamar, Cobb's Legion. Lamar came from a family of Confederate fighting men. He was a graduate of the University of Mississippi and practiced law in Covington, Georgia. He served as captain of the Lamar Infantry, which became Company A of Cobb's Legion, which Lamar enlisted on August 1, 1861 in Covington, Newton County, Georgia. He eventually became lieutenant colonel. Lamar was mortally wounded on September 14, 1862 at the Battle of Crampton's Gap, Maryland, and died the next day as a result of his wounds. Private Bennett R. Jeff Ayres, McCullough Rifles, Company D, 38th Georgia Infantry. Jeff Ayres enlisted on May 12, 1862 in Savannah, Georgia. He was wounded 1 month later at the Battle of Gaines Mill, Virginia on June 27, 1862. He suffered a serious leg wound and was absent on medical furlough for over a year. He finally returned to his regiment, but was then again absent sick. He was captured at High Bridge, Virginia on April 6, 1865, and in the war for him. Jefferson survived the war, but not by long. He died on December 20th, 1866, and is buried in Tucker, DeKalb County, Georgia. Private James McDonald Hutchison, musician/fifer, Thornton Line Volunteers, Company F, 38th Georgia Infantry. Hutchison enlisted on October 15th, 1861 in Elbert County, Georgia. He was killed at the Battle of Gaines Mill, Virginia on June 27, 1862. Private George Washington Rivers, Batty Guards, Company G, 38th Georgia Infantry. Rivers, from Jefferson County, Georgia, enlisted on October 1st, 1861. Rivers died on August 28, 1862 in Charlottesville, Virginia, as a result of typhoid fever. Private Solomon Matthew Swindle Jr., Danielsville Guard, Company D, 16th Georgia Infantry. Swindle enlisted on August 5th, 1861 in Madison County, Georgia. He was captured on July 2nd, 1863 at the Battle of Gettysburg. He was not exchanged until February 1865 and was then furloughed for 30 days. Swindle survived the war, died in 1926, and is buried in Madison County, Georgia. Private Virgil V. Brown, Company D, Phillips, Georgia Legion. Brown enlisted on June 14, 1861 in Cobb County, Georgia. He was wounded in 1864 and sent home to recover. While at home, he was murdered by Federal sympathizers. These restored portraits remind us that history is more than battles and dates. It is people with stories etched into every line of their faces. If you've enjoyed this journey into the past, please like the video, subscribe, and join us for more moments where history is brought back to life. Until then, the echoes of the past live on in color